A waitress asked a simple question to a lonely millionaire. His answer would change both their lives forever. She was fighting to save her dying son. He was drowning in guilt and grief. Neither knew that one act of kindness would unlock a miracle. Neither could have imagined. This is the story of Emma Clark, a single mother who refused to break, and the broken man she unknowingly saved. Emma Clark had learned to carry weight, not just the heavy trays balanced on her forearm as she navigated between tables at Sterling's restaurant, but the invisible weight that pressed against her chest every moment of every day. At 35 years old, her hands showed the wear of endless work, small cuts from broken glasses, dry skin from constant washing, fingers that ached by the end of each shift, but her eyes still held something unbreakable, something that whispered she would not give up, no matter how heavy the burden became. "Table 7 needs water refills, Emma," called Marcus from behind the bar. She nodded, already moving, her body on autopilot after 3 years of working at the upscale restaurant in downtown Portland. The evening rush was beginning. Well-dressed couples filled the leather booths, business executives occupied corner tables, and the soft jazz music mixed with the gentle clinking of wine glasses and silverware. Sterling's was the kind of place where people celebrated promotions, anniversaries, and closed deals. Emma served their happiness with a genuine smile, even when her own life felt like it was held together with borrowed hope and prayer. Her shift had started at 4 in the afternoon. It would end at midnight. Then she would drive home to the small apartment where Mrs. Chen, her elderly neighbor, watched Daniel while Emma worked. Mrs. Chen never asked for payment, but Emma always left what she could, sometimes groceries, sometimes a $20 bill tucked under the sugar bowl. Daniel, her 8-year-old son, her entire reason for breathing. Emma's hand instinctively touched the small photo she kept in her apron pocket, Daniel's school picture from last year. His gap-toothed smile so wide and genuine it made her heart hurt. Before the diagnosis, before everything changed. She pushed the thought away and focused on her tables. Table 4 needed their dessert menus. Table 6 wanted recommendations for wine. Table 7 was him again. The man who sat alone every single night. Emma had noticed him 6 months ago when she first started the evening shift. He arrived precisely at 7:30, always requested the same corner table, always ordered the same meal, ribeye steak, medium rare, with roasted vegetables and a glass of red wine. He never looked at his phone, never brought a laptop or paperwork. He simply sat, ate slowly, and stared at nothing in particular with eyes that seemed to be looking at something far away. He was handsome in a tired way, probably late 30s, with dark hair that was beginning to show gray at the temples, a strong jawline, and suits that Emma recognized as expensive, even though she knew nothing about men's fashion. His watch alone probably cost more than she made in 6 months. But it was his eyes that haunted her. They held a kind of emptiness that Emma recognized because she had seen it in her own mirror during the darkest moments. The look of someone who had lost something irreplaceable. "Good evening, sir," Emma said, approaching his table with a warm smile that she had perfected over years of service work. "Your usual table. Can I start you with still or sparkling water tonight?" He looked up, and for a moment, something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, that she had remembered his preference. "Still water is fine, thank you." His voice was quiet, controlled, with the careful tone of someone who had learned to keep emotions locked away. Emma brought his water, took his order, the same as always, and moved on to her other tables. But throughout the evening she found her gaze drifting back to him, watching him cut his steak into precise pieces, watching him take small sips of wine, watching him sit in a restaurant full of people, completely and utterly alone. At 9:15, her phone buzzed in her pocket. Emma stepped into the kitchen, her heart already racing. Only 2 people ever texted her during work, Mrs. Chen or the hospital. It was Mrs. Prowl. "Chen, Daniel is fine, but he asked for you. Tried to use his inhaler twice tonight. Might want to check his medication levels." Emma's hands trembled as she typed back, "Thank you. I'll call Dr. Ture. Paddle tomorrow. Home by 12:30. She leaned against the stainless steel counter and closed her eyes. Daniel's heart condition, dilated cardiomyopathy, required 3 different medications that cost $847 every month. Emma's health insurance from the restaurant covered 60%. The rest came from her tips, her savings, and sometimes, when times were desperate, from from the small fund her church had set up. But the medication was only managing his symptoms. What Daniel really needed was surgery, a procedure that could repair the damaged valve in his heart. A procedure that cost $150,000. A procedure that insurance would only partially cover, leaving Emma responsible for nearly $60,000. $60,000 might as well have been $6 million. Emma, you okay? Marcus poked his head into the kitchen, concern in his dark eyes. She straightened immediately, forcing brightness into her voice. I'm fine, just checking on Daniel. He's good. Marcus knew better than to push. Emma had that wall up, the one that said she could handle everything on her own, even when she clearly couldn't. When she returned to the floor, the lonely man at table 7 had finished his meal. He sat with his hands folded, staring at the empty plate like it might hold answers to questions he hadn't asked. Something in Emma's chest tightened. Maybe it was her own exhaustion. Maybe it was the text about Daniel. Maybe it was 6 months of watching this man's silent suffering and recognizing it as a mirror of her own. She walked to his table, and instead of simply presenting the check, she did something she had never done before. Sir, Emma said gently, forgive me if this is too forward, but I have to ask, why do you eat alone every night? The man's eyes lifted to hers, and for the first time in 6 months, she saw him truly see her. Not as a waitress, but as a person. His expression shifted surprise, then something that looked like pain, then resignation. What he said next would change everything. James Sterling looked at the waitress, really looked at her for the first time. He had been coming to his own restaurant for 6 months, hiding in plain sight, and this was the first time anyone had asked him a personal question. Her name tag read Emma. She had kind eyes, the color of honey in sunlight, and there was something in her expression that wasn't pity. It was understanding, the kind that only comes from knowing pain personally. I eat alone, James said slowly, his voice rougher than usual. Because I'm afraid of going home to an empty house. At least here there are people around. Even if I'm not with them, they're here. The silence feels less absolute. Emma's expression softened, and she did something unexpected. She pulled out the chair across from him and sat down just for a moment, just for a heartbeat, and said, I understand that kind of silence. The kind that's so loud it drowns out everything else. Before James could respond, she stood quickly, as if realizing she had crossed a professional boundary. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. No, James said. Thank you for asking, for caring enough to ask. Emma smiled a real smile, not the professional one, and placed his check on the table. Everyone deserves to be seen, sir, even when they're trying to hide. She walked away, and James sat in stunned silence. For the first time in 2 years, something in his chest didn't feel quite so hollow. Emma's 12-hour shift finally ended at 12:30. Her feet ached, her lower back throbbed, and she had earned $87 in tips a good night, but still not enough. Never enough. She drove home through empty streets in her 15-year-old Honda, the check engine light glowing like a persistent reminder that everything in her life was one breakdown away from disaster. Mrs. Trees. Chen was dozing on the couch when Emma quietly entered the apartment. Daniel was asleep in his small bedroom, his breathing steady but occasionally catching that small hitch that made Emma's heart stop every time. He's a good boy, Mrs. Chen whispered, gathering her things. Asked about his daddy tonight, though. First time in months. Emma's jaw tightened. Daniel's father Ryan had left when Daniel was 2 years old, when the financial pressure and responsibility became too much. Emma had received exactly 3 child support payments in 6 years. The court orders meant nothing to a man who had disappeared completely. Thank you, Mrs. Chen. Really, I don't know what I'd do without you. The elderly woman patted Emma's hand. We do what we can for each other. That's what neighbors are for. After Mrs. Chen left, Emma stood in Daniel's doorway, watching her son sleep. His small chest rose and fell. His dark hair, so much like Ryan's it sometimes hurt to look at, fell across his forehead. In sleep, he looked peaceful, healthy, normal. But Emma knew the truth. His heart was getting weaker. The medications were losing effectiveness. Dr. Patel had been gentle but clear at the last appointment. Daniel needed surgery within the next 6 months, or his prognosis would become significantly worse. 6 months. $60,000. Emma walked to her own room and pulled out the shoebox she kept under her bed. Inside were carefully organized envelopes, rent, utilities, Daniel's medication, groceries, Daniel's medication, groceries, Daniel's surgery fund. The surgery fund envelope held $4,200. She had been saving for 18 months. At this rate, Daniel would need to wait another 12 years for his surgery. Emma pressed her palms against her eyes, refusing to cry. Crying was a luxury she couldn't afford. Crying meant giving in to despair, and despair meant giving up, and giving up meant losing Daniel. She would not lose Daniel. Her phone buzzed. A text from the restaurant manager, Richard. "Emma, can you pick up tomorrow's morning shift? Jenna called in sick, 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., then your regular evening shift. Double pay for the extra hours." 16 hours. 2 meals with Daniel missed. Her body screaming for rest. Emma typed back, "I'll be there." The next morning, Emma arrived at Sterling's at 5:45, her eyes gritty with insufficient sleep. The restaurant was quiet at this hour. Just the prep cooks in the back and Richard going over inventory. "You're a lifesaver, Emma," Richard said, handing her a coffee. "I know 16 hours is brutal." "It's fine," Emma lied. "I need the hours." What she didn't say, "I need every possible dollar. My son is dying and I'm drowning and I will work until I collapse if it means saving him." The morning shift was slower, mostly business breakfasts and tourists. Emma moved through her section efficiently, her smile never wavering even as exhaustion pulled at her bones. At 1:30, during the brief lull before the evening shift officially began, Emma sat in the back office to update her section's receipts. Richard appeared in the doorway, his expression uncomfortable. "Emma, I need to talk to you about something." Her heart sank. Those words were never followed by good news. "The owner, Mr. Sterling, he's been reviewing staffing costs. He's asked me to reduce the evening shift from 4 servers to 3. I have to let someone go." Emma's world tilted. "Richard, please. I need this job. I need both shifts." "Daniel's medication, I'm not letting you go," Richard said quickly. "You're the best server we have, but I did have to cut your health insurance benefits from full-time to part-time. You'll still have coverage, but the percentage drops from 60% to 40% coverage on prescriptions." The math hit Emma like a physical blow. 40% coverage meant Daniel's monthly medication would now cost her $1,271 instead of $847, an extra $424 every month. Money she didn't have. When does this take effect? Emma's voice was steady, even though she felt like she was falling. "Next month." "I'm sorry, Emma, I really am. I tried to fight it, but..." "It's okay," Emma said, standing up. "I understand. Business is business." She walked out before Richard could see her hands shaking. That evening, the lonely man, Mr. Sterling, as Emma now knew him to be, arrived at his usual time. Emma served him with her usual professional warmth, but something in her had shifted. The owner who reviewed staffing costs, the man who had indirectly cut her lifeline. But when she looked at his face, at the profound sadness that lived in his eyes, she couldn't quite muster anger. He looked like a man barely surviving his own life. "Your ribeye, sir," Emma said, placing his plate down gently. "Is there anything else I can get for you?" James looked up at her, and this time he really studied her face. "Are you all right? You seem tired." The unexpected kindness nearly broke her. "Long day," Emma managed. "But I'm fine." "The woman who asked why I eat alone," James said quietly. "She didn't seem like someone who lies about being fine." Emma's breath caught. For a moment she wanted to tell him everything. About Daniel. About the insurance cut. About the impossible mountain she was trying to climb with bleeding hands. Instead, she smiled. "We all carry things, sir. Some of us just carry them quietly." Something passed between them, recognition perhaps. Two people drowning in different oceans, briefly seeing each other across the water. "James," he said suddenly. "My name is James, not sir." "Emma," she replied, "though you probably already knew that." "I did," James admitted. "You've been serving me for 6 months. I should have introduced myself properly long ago. It was such a small moment, just names exchanged. But somehow, it felt like a door opening. 2 weeks after the insurance cut, Emma's carefully constructed world began to crumble. It started on a Tuesday morning. Daniel was getting ready for school, moving slower than usual, his small hand pressed against his chest. "Mama," he said quietly, "my heart feels funny." Emma was beside him in an instant, her hand on his forehead. No fever then, checking his pulse. Too fast. Much too fast. "Funny how, baby? Like it's trying to run away but keeps tripping," Daniel said, and the innocent way he described it made Emma's throat tighten. She called Dr. Patel's office. They told her to bring Daniel in immediately. The examination took 20 minutes. Dr. Patel's face grew more concerned with each passing moment. "Emma, Daniel's condition has deteriorated faster than we anticipated. His heart function has dropped to 30%. We need to schedule the surgery as soon as possible, within the next month if we can manage it." The room seemed to tilt. "A month? But I'm not ready. The money—" "I understand, Doctor," Patel said gently, "but Daniel's heart won't wait for us to be ready. I've already contacted a cardiac surgeon at Portland General. They're willing to perform the procedure and work with us on a payment plan, but you'll need to make a down payment of at least $20,000 to schedule it." $20,000. Emma had $4,200. "What happens if we wait?" Emma asked, though she already knew the answer. Dr. Patel's eyes were kind but unflinching. "Emma, if we wait, Daniel's heart will continue to weaken. He could go into heart failure. The longer we delay, the riskier the surgery becomes, and the lower his chances of full recovery." Emma heard the words underneath. "Wait too long, and we might lose him entirely." Emma went to work that evening in a daze. She smiled at customers, took orders, served meals, all while her mind frantically calculated impossible math. 20,000 minus 4,200 equals $15,800 she didn't have. She could take out a loan, but her credit was already maxed from previous medical bills. She could ask her church for help, but they had already given so much. She could sell everything she owned, but it wouldn't be enough. She could ask James Sterling for help. The thought arrived uninvited and stayed, persistent as a toothache. James Sterling, the owner, the millionaire who ate alone every night, who had shown her unexpected kindness. No, Emma immediately rejected the idea. She had never asked anyone for money in her life. She had worked for everything, earned everything, refused to be a burden on anyone. Asking James for help felt like admitting defeat, like using their fragile connection for her own benefit. She would find another way. But what way? What possible way? At 7:30, James arrived at his usual table. Emma served him with mechanical precision, her mind elsewhere. "Emma," James said, and his tone made her stop. "Something's wrong. You don't have to tell me what, but please don't pretend everything's fine." Emma's professional mask cracked slightly. "I appreciate your concern, James, but it's nothing you need to worry about. When someone I care about is suffering, I consider it my concern. Someone I care about." The words hung in the air between them. Emma's eyes stung with unexpected tears. She blinked them back furiously. "I have to get back to work." She turned away before he could see her composure shatter. 3 days later, Emma received the eviction notice. She stared at the paper in her hands, reading the words over and over as if they might change. "Notice to vacate premises. Rent payment overdue by 45 days. Vacate within 30 days or face legal action." In her desperation to save money for Daniel's surgery, Emma had fallen behind on rent. She had thought she could catch up with her next paycheck, but the insurance cut had destroyed that plan. Now she was about to lose their apartment. Emma sat on the floor of her tiny living room and finally let herself cry. Great, gasping sobs that she muffled with her hands so Daniel wouldn't hear from his bedroom. This was it, the breaking point, the moment where her strength finally wasn't enough. She cried for 5 minutes. Then she wiped her face, stood up, and started making phone calls. The church could offer $500. Her mother, who lived on disability in another state, could send $200. Emma called every social service organization she could find, filled out emergency assistance applications, researched medical fundraising platforms. By midnight, she had secured an additional $3,000 in promised help. Still not enough. Not nearly enough. The next evening at work, Emma was serving a table when she overheard Richard talking to another server in the kitchen. Mr. Sterling's been through hell, you know. Lost his wife and daughter in a car accident 2 years ago. Driver ran a red light, hit them head on. They say he was in the car behind them, saw the whole thing happen. That's why he can't go home. The house is filled with their memories. That's why he comes here every night. Emma's hands froze on the tray she was carrying. James had lost his family, his wife, his daughter. The weight of it hit her like a wave. All this time, she had been so focused on her own pain that she hadn't fully understood the depth of his. He wasn't just lonely. He was shattered. That night when James came in, Emma served him differently, with gentleness that went beyond professionalism. With recognition of his pain, "James," she said when she brought his meal, "I heard about your family. I'm so deeply sorry." James's face went still. For a moment she thought he might ask her to leave him alone. Instead he said quietly, "Thank you. Not many people mention them anymore. Everyone's afraid of making me uncomfortable by bringing it up. But I think about them every second. Having someone acknowledge they existed, it helps." Emma sat down across from him just for a moment. "What were their names?" "Sarah, my wife, and Lily. She was 6 years old." James's voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly. "Lily loved butterflies. We had planted a whole garden for them. Sarah laughed at everything, even my terrible jokes. They were my whole world." "They sound beautiful," Emma said softly. "They were." James looked at her with haunted eyes. "I survived. They didn't. I don't know how to live with that." Emma understood survivor's guilt. She lived with a different version every day. Why did Daniel get sick when other children stayed healthy? Why was life so unbearably unfair? "You live with it," Emma said, "by honoring them, by finding meaning in the pain, by helping others so their loss isn't meaningless." James stared at her like she had just said something profound. "How did you get so wise?" "Pain teaches things that nothing else can," Emma said. Then, before she could stop herself, "My son is sick. He needs heart surgery within the next month, or he might die. I'm $15,000 short of the down payment. I don't know what to do." The words hung between them, heavy and honest. James's expression changed to shock, then something fierce and determined. "How much do you need?" "No," Emma said immediately, standing up. "I didn't tell you to ask for money. I told you because you shared your pain with me, and I wanted to share mine. We're friends, James. Friends. Not, I can't let you—" "Emma, I have to get back to work," Emma said, and this time she walked away before he could respond. Emma didn't see James for 3 days after their conversation. He didn't come to the restaurant, and his absence felt like a void. She told herself it was better this way. She had made herself too vulnerable. She had crossed a line by sharing her personal crisis with someone who was technically her employer, even if they had become something like friends. On the 4th day, Emma arrived home from work to find an envelope taped to her apartment door. Her name was written on it in elegant handwriting. Inside was a letter and a check. Emma's hand shook as she read. "Dear Emma, you told me that we honor those we've lost by helping others. You gave me the first piece of real advice I've received in 2 years. You saw me, not my money, not my business, but the broken man sitting alone in a restaurant every night. You treated me with kindness when you had every reason to be focused on your own struggles. I cannot fix what happened to my family, but I can help yours. The enclosed check is for $60,000, enough for Daniel's surgery and to give you some breathing room. Please don't see this as charity. See it as one parent helping another. See it as a man who has too much money and not enough purpose, finding a way to make something good come from all this pain. You told me we're friends. Friends help each other. Please let me help. James, the check was for $60,000. Emma sank to the floor in her hallway and sobbed. Great, heaving cries of relief and grief and gratitude and shame all mixed together. Daniel appeared in the hallway, concern on his small face. Mama, why are you crying? Emma pulled him into her arms and held him tight. Because miracles are real, baby. Because sometimes, when everything seems impossible, the world surprises you. But as the shock wore off, another emotion crept in. Pride. Deep, stubborn pride that whispered she had somehow failed by accepting this money. That she should have been able to save her son on her own. that taking James's help meant admitting she wasn't strong enough. Emma called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. She spent the days staring at the check, wrestling with herself. She could cash it, schedule Daniel's surgery, save his life, or she could return it, keep her pride, keep struggling alone. By evening, she knew what she had to do. Emma went to Sterling's that night, even though it was her day off. She wore her nicest dress, a simple blue one. She reserved for church and waited in the parking lot until she saw James's car pull in at 7:30. She intercepted him before he entered the restaurant. "James," Emma said, and he turned, surprise and hope flickering across his face. She held out the check. "I can't accept this." The hope in his eyes died. "Emma, please let me finish," Emma said, her voice shaking. "What you did was the kindest thing anyone has ever done for me. You have no idea what it meant to hold that check in my hands and know that Daniel could be saved. But I can't take it, not like this, not without earning it somehow." James's face hardened. "This isn't about earning, Emma. This is about need. Your son needs surgery. I have the money to provide it. It's simple mathematics." "It's not simple," Emma said, tears streaming down her face. "Don't you see? If I take this money, I become someone who needed saving instead of someone who saved herself. I've worked so hard to never be a burden, to never need anyone, to prove that I can handle life on my own. Taking this money feels like admitting I'm not strong enough." "Not strong enough?" James's voice rose, anger breaking through his careful control. "Emma, you work 16-hour shifts. You raise a sick child alone. You smile at strangers and serve their meals while your whole world is falling apart. You are the strongest person I've ever met. Taking help when you need it isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's survival. You don't understand." "I do understand." James's voice cracked. "I understand pride. I understand refusing help. Do you know how many people offered to help me after Sarah and Lily died? Dozens. Friends, family, grief counselors, support groups. I refused all of them. I told myself I could grieve alone, that I didn't need anyone, that accepting help meant admitting I couldn't handle my own pain. And you know what happened? I almost died. Not physically, but in every way that matters. I stopped living. I stopped caring. I became a ghost, haunting my own life." He stepped closer, his eyes intense. "You saved me, Emma. You asked me why I eat alone. You saw me. You made me feel human again. So please, please let me do this. Not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough to accept grace when it's offered." Emma's resolve wavered. "James, it's $60,000. How can I ever repay that? By letting Daniel grow up healthy. By watching him graduate high school, go to college, get married, have children of his own. By living the life that Sarah and Lily can't. That's repayment enough." Emma stood in the parking lot, the check trembling in her hands, her pride and her love for Daniel warring inside her chest. "What if I fail him anyway?" Emma whispered. "What if I take your money and something else goes wrong? What if the surgery doesn't work? What if I can't be enough for him?" James's expression softened. "Then you have tried with everything you had, and you won't be alone. Emma, I'm not offering you money and then walking away. I'm offering you friendship, partnership, whatever you need." "Why?" Emma asked. "Why would you do all this for someone you barely know?" "Because you're not someone I barely know," James said quietly. "You're the person who reminded me that connection still matters, that kindness still matters, that I'm still alive, even if I wish I wasn't." The honesty of it broke something open in Emma. She had spent so long being strong alone that she had forgotten what it felt like to let someone stand beside her. "Okay," Emma whispered. "Okay, I'll accept your help, but on one condition. Anything. You stop eating alone every night. You let me be your friend for real, not just when I'm serving you dinner." James smiled, the first genuine smile Emma had ever seen on his face. "Deal." Daniel's surgery was scheduled for the following Thursday. The week leading up to it passed in a blur of pre-operative appointments, paperwork, and Emma trying to explain to her 8-year-old son that the doctors were going to fix his heart so he could run and play like other kids. "Will it hurt, Mama?" Daniel asked the night before the surgery. Emma held him close. You'll be asleep the whole time, baby. You won't feel anything, and when you wake up, I'll be right there. Promise." James had quietly arranged for time off work for Emma, 2 weeks of paid leave, which Richard had presented as company policy for medical emergencies, even though Emma suspected there was no such policy. He had also sent flowers to the apartment with a card that read, "You're not alone in this." The morning of the surgery, Emma and Daniel arrived at Portman General Hospital at 6 a.m. Daniel was brave, only crying a little when the nurses inserted his IV line. Emma held his hand until the anesthesiologist put him to sleep. "He'll be in surgery for approximately 4 to 6 hours. The surgeon, Dr. Ramirez, explained. "We'll repair the damaged valve and reinforce the chamber wall. His heart is young and resilient. I'm optimistic." Optimistic. Not guaranteed. Not certain. Optimistic. Emma sat in the waiting room and prayed harder than she had ever prayed in her life. At 9:30, James walked into the waiting room carrying coffee and breakfast sandwiches. Emma looked up, shocked. "What are you doing here?" "Being your friend," James said simply, sitting beside her. "You shouldn't go through this alone." Emma wanted to protest, to insist she was fine, to maintain her independence. Instead, she said, "Thank you, really, thank you." They sat together in the fluorescent-lit waiting room. Sometimes they talked about Daniel, about Sarah and Lily, about life and loss and the strange ways people find each other. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence. At hour 3, Emma started pacing. James brought her water and made her eat half a sandwich. At hour 4, Emma couldn't sit still. Her mind created terrible scenarios, complications, failures, the surgeon coming out with that look on his face, the look that means, "Emma," James said firmly, taking her hand. "Daniel is strong. He has your strength. He's going to be fine." "You can't know that," Emma whispered. "You're right. I can't. But I can choose to believe it until proven otherwise. Faith isn't knowing everything will be okay. It's hoping anyway." At hour 5 and 20 minutes, Dr. Ramirez appeared in the doorway, still in her surgical scrubs. Emma's heart stopped. "Dr. Hub," Ramirez smiled. "The surgery was a complete success. Daniel did beautifully. His heart is already showing improved function. He's in recovery now. You can see him in about 30 minutes. Emma's knees buckled. James caught her, and she sobbed into his shoulder relief so overwhelming it felt like drowning in reverse. "Thank you," Emma gasped. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." She wasn't sure if she was thanking Dr. Ramirez, James, or God, maybe all three. When Emma saw Daniel in the recovery room, he looked so small in the hospital bed, tubes and monitors surrounding him. But his cheeks had color. His breathing was strong. He was alive. He was going to live. "Hey, baby," Emma whispered, kissing his forehead. Daniel's eyes fluttered open. "Mama, I'm here. I'm right here. The surgery went perfectly." "Does this mean I can play soccer?" Daniel asked groggily. Emma laughed through her tears. "Yes, baby. When you heal, you can play soccer." James stood in the doorway, watching them with an expression Emma couldn't quite read. When Daniel fell back asleep, Emma walked over to him. "You didn't have to stay all day," Emma said. "I wanted to," James replied. Seeing him okay, it helps. Knowing that this time the story has a happy ending, that someone's child gets to survive and grow up. Emma understood. This was healing for James too. A different kind of surgery, performed on wounds that medicine couldn't reach. Daniel's recovery progressed beautifully. Within a week he was sitting up, eating solid food, and complaining about being bored, which the nurses said was the best sign of all. Emma spent every day at the hospital, sleeping in the chair beside Daniel's bed. James visited every evening after work, bringing books for Daniel and coffee for Emma. On the 8th day, while Daniel was napping, James said something that surprised Emma. "I've been thinking about what you said, about honoring the people we've lost by helping others. I want to start a foundation, the Sarah and Lily Sterling Foundation for Families in Medical Crisis, specifically to help single parents who can't afford their children's medical care." Emma's breath caught. "James, that's beautiful." "I want you to run it," James continued. "Be the director. You understand what these families are going through better than anyone. You could make a real difference. I'm a waitress, James. I don't have any experience running a foundation. You're a mother who navigated an impossible system and survived. That's the only experience that matters. Emma, you could help hundreds of families avoid what you went through. You could be the miracle for someone else that I was lucky enough to be for you. Emma felt tears welling up again. I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it, James said. The foundation will take time to set up properly, but I can't imagine doing this with anyone else. I'll think about it, Emma promised, but in her heart she already knew her answer. 6 months later, Emma stood in the conference room of the Sarah and Lily Sterling Foundation, reviewing applications from families who needed help. Each file told a story similar to her own. Parents working multiple jobs, children with serious medical conditions, hope balanced on the edge of despair. Emma's job was to make sure those stories had different endings than they might have had. Daniel was thriving. His heart function had improved to nearly normal levels. He had joined a soccer team, just a recreational league. Nothing too strenuous, but enough to make him feel like a regular kid. His laugh filled their new apartment, the one James had helped Emma find in a safer neighborhood with better schools. Emma had accepted the position as foundation director. The salary was modest but stable enough to cover their needs, with room left over for savings. More importantly, the work filled Emma with purpose. Every family she helped felt like a small redemption, a transformation of her pain into something meaningful. James had changed too. He still came to Sterling's restaurant occasionally, but now he sat at tables with Emma, with her son, with the other foundation staff. He had started seeing a grief counselor. He had visited Sarah and Lily's graves for the first time in a year, and told them about the foundation, about Emma and Daniel, about trying to live again. I'll never stop missing them, James told Emma one evening as they reviewed foundation budgets. But I think I'm finally learning to carry the grief instead of being buried by it. They'd be proud of you, Emma said. Of the foundation, of how you're honoring them. I hope so, James said quietly. I really hope so. One evening, Emma and Daniel invited James over for dinner at their apartment. Daniel had insisted on making spaghetti his specialty, which mostly involved enthusiastic stirring and getting sauce on everything. After dinner, while Daniel showed James his Lego creation, Emma watched them together and felt a strange flutter in her chest. Not just gratitude, not just friendship, something else, something that felt like possibility. She pushed the feeling away. James was her friend, her employer, the man who had saved her son. Anything more would complicate things, would risk the fragile, beautiful thing they had built together. But as she watched James laugh at something Daniel said, she wondered if maybe, someday, there could be room for more. For now, friendship was enough. Family, the chosen kind, was enough. The foundation's first anniversary gala was held at Sterling's restaurant. Over 200 people attended, donors, recipients, community leaders, and families the foundation had helped. Emma stood at the podium to give a speech. Her hands trembled as she looked out at the crowd. A year ago, Emma began, I was drowning. My son needed surgery I couldn't afford. I was working 16-hour days and still falling short. I felt alone, desperate, and out of options. Then someone saw me, really saw me, not as a waitress or a charity case, but as a person worth caring about. That simple act of being seen changed everything. Emma's eyes found James in the crowd. He was watching her with quiet pride. This foundation exists because of a simple truth. None of us can survive alone. We need each other. We need kindness, compassion, and the courage to accept help when we need it. We need to remember that strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up and letting others help us stand. Emma's voice grew stronger. Over the past year, the Sarah and Lily Sterling Foundation has helped 43 families access critical medical care for their children. 43 children who might not have had that chance otherwise. Each one is a miracle. Each one is proof that love and generosity can change the world, one family at a time. The room erupted in applause. Daniel, sitting in the front row, beamed at his mother with pure pride. After the speech, James approached Emma with champagne glasses. To new beginnings, he said, raising his glass. To healing, Emma countered. To both, James agreed. They clinked glasses and drank. You know, James said after a moment. I never thanked you properly for asking me that question. Why I ate alone every night. You thanked me by saving my son's life, Emma said. I think that counts. No, I mean it. You gave me a reason to stop hiding. You reminded me that connection is possible, even after loss. You saved me just as much as I saved you. Emma smiled. Then we're even. Not even close, James said. But we have time to figure out the balance. The way he said it, we have time, made Emma's heart skip. They had time. Time for Daniel to grow up healthy. Time for the foundation to help more families. Time for James to continue healing. Time for Emma to build a life she had never imagined possible. Time, perhaps, for whatever came next. 3 years later, Emma sat in her office at the foundation, now expanded to 3 locations across Oregon, and reviewed the numbers. They had helped over 300 families access medical care for their children. 300 lives changed. 300 miracles. Daniel, now 11 years old, was in middle school and captain of his soccer team. His heart was strong. His future was bright. James had finally sold the house he had shared with Sarah and Lily, keeping only the butterfly garden, which he maintained every weekend. He had started dating again, tentatively, carefully, but hopeful. Emma had been on a few dates herself. Nothing serious. She was still learning to open her heart to new possibilities, but she and James remained best friends, co-workers, family. One evening, Daniel asked Emma, Mama, do you think we would have been okay if Mr. Sterling hadn't helped us? Emma thought about it honestly. I don't know, baby. Maybe. I would have fought for you until my last breath. But I'm grateful we didn't have to find out. I'm grateful for every moment we've had since then. Me too, Daniel said. Then, with the wisdom of children, I think maybe we helped him too. He smiles now. He didn't used to smile. Emma pulled her son close. You're absolutely right. Sometimes the people we help end up helping us just as much. That's the beautiful mystery of kindness. Emma Clark learned that strength isn't about carrying everything alone. It's about having the courage to accept grace when it's offered. She learned that accepting help isn't weakness, but wisdom. That pride can protect us. The connection heals us. James Sterling learned that honoring the people we've lost means living fully, loving completely, and turning pain into purpose. Together, they learned that sometimes the question we need to ask isn't why me, but who can I help with what I've learned from this? Their story reminds us that we are all interconnected. Your pain can become someone else's hope. Your generosity can become someone else's miracle. And the simple act of truly seeing another person, of asking them why they sit alone, can change 2 lives forever. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and share it with someone who needs hope today. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about real people, real struggles, and the extraordinary grace that can emerge from ordinary moments. Remember, you are not alone. Your struggles matter. Your story matters. And somewhere, someone needs exactly the wisdom your pain has taught you. Thank you for watching. Until next time, choose kindness. Choose connection. Choose love.